Chord music. This article is about pitch simultaneity and harmony in music. For other uses, see chord, disambiguation. A chord, in music, is any harmonic set of pitches, frequencies consisting of multiple notes, also called pitches, that are heard as if sounding simultaneously. For many practical and theoretical purposes, arpeggios and broken chords, in which the notes of the chord are sounded one after the other, rather than simultaneously, or sequences of chord tones, may also be considered as chords in the right musical context. In tonal Western classical music, music with a tonic key or home key, the most frequently encountered chords are triads, so called because they consist of three distinct notes, the root note, and intervals of a third and a fifth above the root note. Chords with more than three notes include added tone chords, extended chords and tone clusters, which are used in contemporary classical music, jazz and almost any other genre. A series of chords is called a chord progression. One example of a widely used chord progression in Western traditional music and blues is the 12-bars blues progression. Although any chord may in principle be followed by any other chord, certain patterns of chords are more common in Western music. And some patterns have been accepted as establishing the key, tonic note, in common practice harmony, notably the resolution of a dominant chord to a tonic chord. To describe this, Western music theory has developed the practice of numbering chords using Roman numerals to represent the number of diatonic steps up from the tonic note of the scale. Common ways of notating or representing chords in Western music, other than conventional staff notation, include Roman numerals, the Nashville number system, figured bass, chord letters, sometimes used in modern musicology, and chord charts. Contents: 1 definition, 2 history, 3 notation, 3.1 Roman numerals, 3.2 figured bass notation, 3.3 chord letters, 3.4 notation in popular music, 3.4.1 symbols, 3.4.2 examples, 3.4.3 use. 4 characteristics, 4.1 number of notes, 4.2 scale degree, 4.3 inversion, 4.4 secundal, tertian and quartal chords, 4.5 harmonic content, 5 common types of chords, 5.1 triads, 5.2 seventh chords, 5.3 extended chords, 5.4 altered chords, 5.5 added tone chords, 5.6 suspended chords, 5.7 borrowed chords, 6 references, 6.1 notes, 6.2 citations, 6.3 sources, 6.4 further reading, 7 external links. Definition, edit, main article, harmony. The English word chord derives from Middle English chord, a back formation of a chord in the original sense of agreement and later harmonious sound. A sequence of chords is known as a chord progression or harmonic progression. These are frequently used in Western music. A chord progression aims for a definite goal of establishing, or contradicting, a tonality founded on a key, root or tonic chord. The study of harmony involves chords and chord progressions and the principles of connection that govern them. Otto Carolyi writes that, 2 or more notes sounded simultaneously are known as a chord, though, since instances of any given note in different octaves may be taken as the same note, it is more precise for the purposes of analysis to speak of distinct pitch classes. Furthermore, as 3 notes are needed to define any common chord, 3 is often taken as the minimum number of notes that form a definite chord. Hence, Andrew Sermani, for example, states, when 3 or more notes are sounded together, the combination is called a chord. George T. Jones agrees. 2 tones sounding together are usually termed an interval, while 3 or more tones are called a chord. According to Monath, a chord is a combination of 3 or more tones sounded simultaneously, and the distances between the tones are called intervals. However, Sonorities of two pitches, or even single-note melodies, are commonly heard as implying chords. A simple example of two notes being interpreted as a chord is when the root and third are played but the fifth is omitted. In the key of C major, if the music comes to rest on the two notes G and B, most listeners will hear this as a G major chord. Claude Debussy's Première Arabesque. The chords on the lower stave are constructed from the notes in the actual piece, shown in the upper stave. Since a chord may be understood as such even when all its notes are not simultaneously audible. There has been some academic discussion regarding the point at which a group of notes may be called a chord. Jean-Jacques Nattiers explains that, we can encounter pure chords in a musical work such as in the Promenade of Modest Mussorgsky's pictures at an exhibition, but, often, we must go from a textual given to a more abstract representation of the chords being used, as in Claude Debussy's Première Arabesque. History. Edit. In the medieval era, early Christian hymns featured organum, which used the simultaneous perfect intervals of a fourth, a fifth, and an octave. With chord progressions and harmony an incidental result of the emphasis on melodic lines during the medieval and then Renaissance 15th to 17th centuries. The Baroque period, the 17th and 18th centuries, began to feature the major and minor scale-based tonal system and harmony, including chord progressions and circle progressions. It was in the Baroque period that the accompaniment of melodies with chords was developed, as in figured bass, and the familiar cadences, perfect authentic, etc. In the Renaissance, certain dissonant sonorities that suggest the dominant seventh occurred with frequency. In the Baroque period, the dominant seventh proper was introduced and was in constant use in the classical and Romantic periods. The leading tone seventh appeared in the Baroque period and remains in use. Composers began to use non-dominant seventh chords in the Baroque period. They became frequent in the Classical period, gave way to altered dominance in the Romantic period, and underwent a resurgence in the post-Romantic and Impressionistic period. The Romantic period, the 19th century, featured increased chromaticism. Composers began to use secondary dominants in the Baroque, and they became common in the Romantic period. Many contemporary popular Western genres continue to rely on simple diatonic harmony, though far from universally. Notable exceptions include the music of film scores, which often use chromatic, atonal or post-tonal harmony, and modern jazz, especially circa 1960. In which chords may include up to 7 notes, and occasionally more. When referring to chords that do not function as harmony, such as in atonal music, the term sonority is often used specifically to avoid any tonal implications of the word chord. Chords are also used for timbre effects. In organ registers, certain chords are activated by a single key so that playing a melody results in parallel voice leading. These voices, losing independence, are fused into one with a new timbre. The same effect is also used in synthesizers and orchestral arrangements. For instance, in Ravel's Bolero No. 5 the parallel parts of flutes, horn and celesta, being tuned as a chord, resemble the sound of an electric organ. Notation. Edit. Chord symbol redirects here. For other uses, see chord names and symbols, popular music. Chords can be represented in various ways. The most common notation systems are 1. Plain staff notation, used in classical music. 2. Roman numerals, commonly used in harmonic analysis to denote the scale step on which the chord is built. 3. Figured bass, much used in the Baroque era, uses numbers added to a bass line written on a staff, to enable keyboard players to improvise chords with the right hand while playing the bass with their left. 4. Chord letters, sometimes used in modern musicology, to denote chord root and quality. 5. Various chord names and symbols used in popular music lead sheets, fake books, and chord charts, to quickly lay out the harmonic ground plan of a piece so that the musician may improvise, jam, or vamp on it. Roman numerals. Edit. Main article. Roman numeral analysis. While scale degrees are typically represented in musical analysis or musicology articles with Arabic numerals, e.g., 1, 2, 3, sometimes with a circumflex above the numeral. The triads, three-note chords, that have these degrees as their roots are often identified by Roman numerals, e.g., I, IV, V, which in the key of C major would be the triads C major, F major, G major. In some conventions, as in this and related articles, uppercase Roman numerals indicate major triads, e.g., I, IV, V, while lowercase Roman numerals indicate minor triads, e.g., I for a major chord and I for a minor chord, or using the major key, E, E and Vi representing typical diatonic minor triads. Other writers, e.g. Schoenberg, use uppercase Roman numerals for both major and minor triads. Some writers use uppercase Roman numerals to indicate the chord is diatonic in the major scale, and lowercase Roman numerals to indicate that the chord is diatonic in the minor scale. Diminished triads may be represented by lowercase Roman numerals with a degree symbol, e.g., VII indicates a diminished seventh chord built on the seventh scale degree, in the key of C major. This chord would be B diminished seventh, which consists of the notes B, D, F and A flat. Roman numerals can also be used in stringed instrument notation to indicate the position or string to play. In some string music, the string on which it is suggested that the performer play the note is indicated with a Roman numeral, e.g., on a four-string orchestral string instrument. I indicates the highest pitched, thinnest string and IV indicates the lowest pitched, thickest bass string. In some orchestral parts, chamber music and solo works for string instruments, the composer specifies to the performer which string should be used with the Roman numeral. Alternately, the note name of the string that the composer wishes the performer to use is stated using letters, e.g., Sol G means play on the G string. Figured bass notation, edit, main article, figured bass. Figured bass or thorough bass is a kind of musical notation used in almost all Baroque music, circa 1600 to 1750, though rarely in music from later than 1750. To indicate harmonies in relation to a conventionally written bass line. Figured bass is closely associated with chord-playing basso continuo accompaniment instruments, which include harpsichord, pipe organ and lute. Added numbers, symbols, and accidentals beneath the staff indicate the intervals above the bass note to play, that is, the numbers stand for the number of scale steps above the written note to play the figured notes. For example, in the figured bass below, the bass note is AC, and the numbers 4 and 6 indicate that notes a fourth and a sixth above, F and A, should be played. Giving the second inversion of the F major triad can be realized as, if no numbers are written beneath a bass note, the figure is assumed to be 3, which calls for a third and a fifth above the bass note, i.e., a root position triad. In the 2010s, some classical musicians who specialize in music from the Baroque era can still perform chords using figured bass notation. In many cases, however, the chord-playing performers read a fully notated accompaniment that has been prepared for the piece by the music publisher. Such a part, with fully written-out chords, is called a realization of the figured bass part. Chord letters, edit, main article, chord letters. Chord letters are used by musicologists, music theorists and advanced university music students to analyze songs and pieces. Chord letters use uppercase and lowercase letters to indicate the roots of chords, followed by symbols that specify the chord quality. Notation in popular music, edit, main article, chord names and symbols, popular music. In most genres of popular music, including jazz, pop, and rock, a chord name and the corresponding symbol are typically composed of one or more parts. In these genres, chord-playing musicians in the rhythm section, e.g., electric guitar, acoustic guitar, piano, Hammond organ, etc., typically improvise the specific voicing of each chord from a song's chord progression by interpreting the written chord symbols appearing in the lead sheet or fakebook. Normally, these chord symbols include 1. A big letter indicating the root note, e.g. C. 2. A symbol or abbreviation indicating the chord quality, e.g. minor, August or. If no chord quality is specified, the chord is assumed to be a major triad by default. 3. Numbers indicating the stacked intervals above the root note, e.g. 7 or 13. 4. Additional musical symbols are abbreviations for special alterations, e.g. flat 5, sharp 5 or add 13. 5. An added slash, and an uppercase letter indicates that a bass note other than the root should be played. These are called slash chords. For instance, C. F indicates that a C major triad should be played with an added F in the bass. In some genres of modern jazz, two chords with a slash between them may indicate an advanced chord type called a polychord, which is the playing of two chords simultaneously. The correct notation of this should be F, C, which sometimes get mixed up with slash chords. Chord qualities are related with the qualities of the component intervals that define the chord. The main chord qualities are 1. Major and minor. A chord is major by default and altered with added info. C equals C major, Cm equals C minor. 2. Augmented, diminished, and half diminished. 3. Dominant seventh. Symbols. Edit. The symbols used for notating chords are 1. M, min, or minus indicates a minor chord. The M must be lowercase to distinguish it from the M for major. 2. M, ma, major, delta, or no symbol, indicates a major chord. In a jazz context, this typically indicates that the player should use any suitable chord of a major quality, for example a major seventh chord or a 6/9 chord. In a lot of jazz styles, an unembellished major triad is rarely if ever played, but in a lead sheet the choice of which major quality chord to use is left to the performer. 3. Plus or August indicates an augmented chord, A or A is not used. 4. Or dim indicates a diminished chord, either a diminished triad or a diminished seventh chord, D is not used. 5. Indicates a half-diminished seventh chord. In some fakebooks, the abbreviation M is used as an equivalent symbol. 6. 2 is mostly used as an extra note in a chord, e.g. add 2, sus2. 7. 3 is the minor or major quality of the chord and is rarely written as a number. 8. 4 is mostly used as an extra note in a chord, e.g. add 4, sus4. 9. 5 is the perfect fifth of the chord and is only written as a number when altered, e.g. F7. In guitar music, like rock, a 5 indicates a power chord, which consists of only the root and fifth, possibly with the root doubled an octave higher. 10. 6 indicates a sixth chord. There are no rules if the 6 replaces the fifth or not. 11. 7 indicates a dominant seventh chord. However, if major 7, M7 or delta 7 is indicated, this is a major seventh chord, e.g. G or F. Very rarely, also dom is used for dominant seventh. 12. 9 indicates a ninth chord, which in jazz usually includes the dominant seventh as well, if it is a dominant chord. 13. 11 indicates an 11th chord, which in jazz usually includes the dominant seventh and ninth as well, if it is a dominant chord. 14. 13 indicates a 13th chord, which in jazz usually includes the dominant seventh, ninth and 11th as well. 15. 6/9 indicates a triad with the addition of the 6th and 9th. 16. sus4, or simply 4, indicates a sus chord with the third omitted and the fourth used instead. Other notes may be added to a sus4 chord, indicated with the word add, and the scale degree, e.g., A or A. 17. sus2, or simply 2, indicates a sus chord with the third omitted and the second, which may also be called the ninth, used instead. As with sus4, a, sus2 chord can have other scale degrees added, e.g., A or A. 18. Flat 9 parenthesis is used to indicate explicit chord alterations, e.g., A. The parenthesis is probably left from older days when jazz musicians weren't used to altered chords. Albeit important, the parenthesis can be left unplayed, with no musical harm. 19. Add indicates that an additional interval number should be added to the chord. E.g. C is a C7th chord plus an added 13th. 20. Alt or alt-dom indicates an altered dominant 7th chord, e.g. G. 21. Omit 5, or simply number 5, indicates that the indicated note should be omitted. Examples: edit. The table below lists common chord types, their symbols and their components. Chord components. Name symbol on C interval P1 M2 M2 M3 M3 P4 D5 P5 A5 M6 D7 M7 M7. Short long semitones 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11. Major triad CC delta P1 M3 P5. Major sixth chord CCM CMH 6 P1 M3 P5 M6. Dominant seventh chord CC Dim 7 P1 M3 P5 M7. Major seventh chord CM CCMH P1 M3 P5 M7. Augmented triad C plus chord P1 M3 A5. Augmented seventh chord C plus chord P1 M3 A5 M7. Minor triad CM CM and P1 M3 P5. Minor sixth chord CM CM and P1 M3 P5 M6. Minor seventh chord CM CM and P1 M3 P5 M7. Minor major seventh chord CM CM M7. CM M7 CM and CM and major 7 CM and major 7 P1 M3 P5 M7. Diminished triad C C Dim P1 M3 D5. Diminished seventh chord C C Dim P1 M3 D5 D7. Half diminished seventh chord C C P1 M3 D5 M7. Use edit. The basic function of chord symbols is to eliminate the need to write out sheet music. The modern jazz player has extensive knowledge of the chordal functions and can mostly play music by reading the chord symbols only. Advanced chords are common, especially in modern jazz. Altered ninths, 11ths and 5ths are not common in pop music. In jazz, a chord chart is used by comping musicians, jazz guitar, jazz piano, Hammond organ, to improvise a chordal accompaniment and to play improvised solos. Jazz bass players improvise a bassline from a chord chart. Chord charts are used by horn players and other solo instruments to guide their solo improvisations. Interpretation of chord symbols depends on the genre of music being played. In jazz from the bebop era or later, major and minor chords are typically realized as seventh chords even if only C or CM appear in the chart. In jazz charts, seventh chords are often realized with upper extensions, such as the 9th, sharp 11th, and 13th, even if the chart only indicates A. In jazz, the root and fifth are often omitted from chord voicings, except when there is a diminished fifth or an augmented fifth. In a pop or rock context, however, C and CM would almost always be played as triads with no sevenths. In pop and rock, in the relatively less common cases where songwriters wish a dominant seventh, major seventh, or minor seventh chord, they will indicate this explicitly with the indications C, C, or CM. Characteristics. Edit. Within the diatonic scale, every chord has certain characteristics, which include 1. The number of pitch classes, distinct notes without respect to octave, in the chord, 2. The scale degree of the root note, 3. the position or inversion of the chord. 4. The general type of intervals it is constructed from, for example, seconds, thirds, or fourths, and 5. Counts of each pitch classes occur between all combinations of notes the chord contains. Number of notes. Edit. 2 note combinations, whether referred to as chords or intervals, are called dyads. In the context of a specific section in a piece of music, dyads can be heard as chords if they have the most important notes that identify a certain chord. For example, in a piece in C major, after a section of tonic C major chords, if a dyad containing the notes B and D is played, listeners will likely hear this as a first inversion G major chord. Other dyads are more ambiguous, an aspect that composers can use creatively. For example, a dyad with a perfect fifth has no third, so it does not sound major or minor. A composer who ends a section on a perfect fifth could subsequently add the missing third. Another example is a dyad outlining the tritone, such as the notes C and F sharp in C major. This dyad could be heard as implying a D7 chord, resolving to G major, or as implying a C diminished chord, resolving to D flat major. In unaccompanied duos for 2 instruments, such as flute duos, the only combinations of notes that are possible are dyads. Which means that all of the chord progressions must be implied through dyads, as well as with arpeggios. Chords constructed of 3 notes of some underlying scale are described as triads. Chords of 4 notes are known as tetrads, those containing 5 are called pentads and those using 6 are hexads. Sometimes the terms trichord, tetrachord, pentachord, and hexachord are used, though these more usually refer to the pitch classes of any scale, not generally played simultaneously. Chords that may contain more than 3 notes include pedal point chords, dominant seventh chords, extended chords, added tone chords, clusters, and polychords. Polychords are formed by 2 or more chords superimposed. Often these may be analyzed as extended chords. Examples include tertian, altered chord, secundal chord, quartal and quintal harmony and tristan chord. Another example is when G-BD Fa flat C sharp is formed from G major G-BD and D flat major D flat Fa flat. A non-chord tone is a dissonant or unstable tone that lies outside the chord currently heard, though often resolving to a chord tone. Scale degree. Edit. Main article. Degree. Music. In the key of C major, the first degree of the scale, called the tonic, is the note C itself. A C major chord, the major triad built on the note C, C-E-G, is referred to as the one chord of that key and notated in Roman numerals as I. The same C major chord can be found in other scales. It forms chord 3 in the key of A minor, A right pointing arrow B right pointing arrow C, and chord IV in the key of G major, G right pointing arrow A right pointing arrow B right pointing arrow C. This numbering indicates the chords' function. Many analysts use lowercase Roman numerals to indicate minor triads and uppercase numerals for major triads, and degree and plus signs, and, to indicate diminished and augmented triads respectively. Otherwise, all the numerals may be uppercase and the qualities of the chords inferred from the scale degree. Chords outside the scale can be indicated by placing a flat, sharp sign before the chord. For example, the chord E flat major in the key of C major is represented by flat 3. The tonic of the scale may be indicated to the left, e.g., F sharp, or may be understood from a key signature or other contextual clues. Indications of inversions or added tones may be omitted if they are not relevant to the analysis. Roman numeral analysis indicates the root of the chord as a scale degree within a particular major key as follows. Inversion. Edit. Main article. Inverted chord. In the harmony of Western art music, a chord is in root position when the tonic note is the lowest in the chord, the bass note, and the other notes are above it. When the lowest note is not the tonic, the chord is inverted. Chords that have many constituent notes can have many different inverted positions as shown below for the C major chord. Bass note position order of notes. Starting from the bass, notation. C root position CEG or CGE. 3 as G is a fifth above C and E is a third above CE first inversion EGC or ECG. 3 as C is a sixth above E and G is a third above EG second inversion GCE or GEC. 4 as E is a sixth above G and C is a fourth above G. Further, a 4-note chord can be inverted to 4 different positions by the same method as triadic inversion. For example, a G chord can be in root position, G is bass note, first inversion, B is bass note, second inversion, D is bass note, or third inversion, F is bass note. Where guitar chords are concerned, the term inversion is used slightly differently to refer to stock fingering shapes. Secundal, tertian, and quartal chords. Edit. See also: secundal, tertian, quartal and quintal harmony, and mixed interval chord. Many chords are a sequence of notes separated by intervals of roughly the same size. Chords can be classified into different categories by this size. 1. Tertian chords can be decomposed into a series of major or minor thirds. For example, the C major triad, CEG, is defined by a sequence of 2 intervals, the first, CE, being a major third and the second, EG, being a minor third. Most common chords are tertian. 2. Secundal chords can be decomposed into a series of major or minor seconds. For example, the chord C-D-E flat is a series of seconds, containing a major second, CD, and a minor second, D-E flat. 3. Quartal chords can be decomposed into a series of perfect or augmented fourths. Quartal harmony normally works with a combination of perfect and augmented fourths. Diminished fourths are inharmonically equivalent to major thirds, so they are uncommon. For example, the chord CFB is a series of fourths, containing a perfect fourth, CF, and an augmented fourth tritone, FB. These terms can become ambiguous when dealing with non-diatonic scales, such as the pentatonic or chromatic scales. The use of accidentals can also complicate the terminology. For example, the chord B-sharp E-A flat appears to be quartal, as a series of diminished fourths, B-sharp E and E-A flat. But it is inharmonically equivalent to, and sonically indistinguishable from, the tertian chord C-E-G-sharp, which is a series of major thirds, C-E and E-G-sharp. Harmonic content. Edit. The notes of a chord form intervals with each of the other notes of the chord in combination. A 3-note chord has 3 of these harmonic intervals, a 4-note chord has 6, a 5-note chord has 10, a 6-note chord has 15. The absence, presence, and placement of certain key intervals plays a large part in the sound of the chord, and sometimes of the selection of the chord that follows. A chord containing tritones is called tritonic, one without tritones is atritonic. Harmonic tritones are an important part of dominant seventh chords, giving their sound a characteristic tension, and making the tritone interval likely to move in certain stereotypical ways to the following chord. Tritones are also present in diminished seventh and half-diminished chords. A chord containing semitones, whether appearing as minor seconds or major sevenths, is called hemitonic. One without semitones is anemitonic. Harmonic semitones are an important part of major seventh chords, giving their sound a characteristic high tension, and making the harmonic semitone likely to move in certain stereotypical ways to the following chord. A chord containing major sevenths but no minor seconds is much less harsh in sound than one containing minor seconds as well. Other chords of interest might include the 1. Diminished triad, which has many minor thirds and no major thirds, many tritones but no perfect fifths. 2. Augmented triad, which has many major thirds and no minor thirds or perfect fifths. 3. Dominant 7th flat 5 chord, which has many major thirds and tritones and no minor thirds or perfect fifths. Common types of chords. Edit. This article needs additional citations for verification. Please help improve this article by adding citations to reliable sources. Unsourced material may be challenged and removed. Find sources. CHORD, Music, News Newspapers Books Scholar JSTOR, April 2019. Learn how and when to remove this template message. Try